Good morning, everybody. I would like to welcome you to our conference on assessing and labeling the nationality of European audiovisual works. My name is Susanne Nikolchev, and I'm here to lead into the session by a simple question. What do we mean by nationality of work? Now, the truth is we don't know exactly. It might mean different things depending on who defines it and in what context. To give you one example, nationality is an important criterion in public funding schemes, but the elements used, let's say, for example, by the French CNC to classify that a film is French are not the same that the German FFA would use for classifying a German film. This puts us into a dilemma because nationality matters for what is European. You get that, for example, from the Audiovisual Media Service Directive that defines that works originating in an EU member state are European works. But why does this interest us at the observatory? Now, the first answer to that question is another question. What is the observatory? The observatory is part of the Council of Europe, based in Strasbourg. It was established in 1992 to collect, analyze, and distribute factual information of strategic relevance to the audiovisual sector in Europe in order to enhance transparency. Now, we have 41 member states, almost all countries in Europe, with Morocco even one country outside of Europe, and we have another member, the European Union, which is represented at our governing board by the European Commission. Now, the European Commission is more generally a very valued partner for activities and events like today's conference. But going back to why we are interested in national and European works, well, we automatically deal with these notions when we look at topics where they matter. Again, I would like to give you an example this time, the Lumiere VOD database, where we trace which European films are available on on-demand services in Europe. Now, this database contains more than 40,000 film titles, and before we register any film in that database, we have to decide if it is European. This makes our life complicated because, as I said, there is no universal definition of national or European. We use information on who produces or co-produces the film. This is one important aspect, of course, of nationality, but it does not indicate the official Europeanness of audiovisual work. I give you another example, which is coming from a study that the EFAT commissioned and we published last year. There we looked at the rules that national regulators apply to assess what constitutes European works. Now, this was part of our mapping of how countries transpose the obligation of the Audiovisual Media Services Directive to promote European audiovisual works. So again, that's why these notions are important. Now, more recently, the European Commission asked us to produce comparative data and analysis of the legal definitions and current practices in place in the EU concerning the nationality of European audiovisual works. Now, you will hear about the findings of this mapping in the two keynotes, and I will leave it to the European Commission to give you a first-hand answer as to why they are interested in these notions. Now, therefore, I have the pleasure to pass on the floor to the Commission, and more precisely to Raffaele Di Giovanni Bezzi, Head of Sector in the Audiovisual and Media Policy Unit. Hello, Giovanni, and Raffaele, and the floor is yours.
Okay, good morning. Good morning, Nicole. I guess that I can start, that I'm technically enabled. I think that, first of all, it is an honor and a pleasure for me to open this conference today on the assessment and labeling of nationality of European works. I wish to thank the Observatory for organizing the conference and most importantly for authoring the report on such a complex and critical topic. I must admit that this is not perhaps a super fancy topic. as it is very technical and data intensive. However, there is no doubt that it is a matter of utmost importance for ensuring the correct implementation of the revised AVMSD rules on European works. So why are we discussing this topic today? The definition of European works is not a new one. It was introduced in the first time already with the first directive that regulated audiovisual services, the 1989 Television Without Frontiers Directive, where it accompanied the broadcaster's obligation to secure a majority of transmission time of European works. The rules and the corresponding definition have remained substantially unchanged. The question arises, why now this topic has become again a topic worth of discussion? Well, the answer in a way is simple, and it depends on the fact that the definition today applies to a larger and more compelling context than it was in the past. The revised Audiovisual Media Service Directive has introduced new, very compelling rules on promotion of European works, obliging, namely, notably video-on-demand providers to secure a 30% share of European works in their catalogs and to give prominence to such works. So, compared to the past, the obligation is much more stringent today. In the past, there was simply an obligation to ensure promotion of European works where practicable and by appropriate means. In addition, there was no indication of how this should be implemented in practice. So we are in front today of a completely renewed legal framework with a new paradigm on the promotion of European works. And this is one of the pillars of the revision of the AVMSD, and an essential tool to ensure cultural diversity and adequate levels of investment in European works. So here, this explains, in my view, very clearly why we are today discussing with a certain urgency even this topic. Now, the definition of European works is based on the origin of the works in a member state of the European Union or in a third country that is party to the European Council Convention of Transfrontier Television. But what are the criteria to establish when works originate from these countries, from these states? The directive definition relies essentially on two elements. The first one is based on the workforce. It requires that these works are mainly made with authors and workers from these states. And the second relies on the establishment, basically, of the producers, requiring that the works have to be made by producers or supervised by producers established in one of these states. In case of co-production, it is further required. It's further required that there is a majority contribution to the works from producers established in these states. So, as you can see, the definition is it's not an easy one. It's a very complex one and requires access to a significant amount of information that is not necessarily easily accessible. The report of the observatory that we're discussing today luckily comes to the conclusion, finds out that there is a high degree of convergence with regard to the definition of European works throughout Europe. So that we have a common ground, and this is to start, and this is certainly essential in order to avoid fragmentation and inconsistency and confusion in the market. However, it also, and here I think we need to really focus a lot today, it also comes to the conclusion that the application in practice of this definition is fraught with difficulties and challenges. The main issues that have been flagged in the report relate to the difficulties related to having access to an extremely complex and massive amount of data, and also the absence of generally recognized sources of information such as databases. So I think today we have a unique opportunity to focus on these difficulties and to see how the European Commission, on the one hand, but most importantly, regulators and member states authorities at national level, what they can do to support the endeavors of providers and in qualifying works as European and ensuring compliance with the new rules. One topic that I think will be central is the use of technological means to assist in these efforts, such as metadata labeling in metadata. Now, this is an aspect that is already mentioned in the preamble of the directive, which encourages at recital 35 member states to promote the use of labeling in metadata to qualify European audiovisual work as European. This is not an obligation because it's only in a recital. The AVMSD mainly lays down obligations for media service providers. Therefore, it does not was not decided not to include this as a stringent obligation in the operative part of the directive. However, it cannot be denied that this can be a really important and crucial tool to facilitate the practical implementation of the directive. The report delves specifically on this issue, and it confirms that there is not, unfortunately, yet established practice in this regard, except some promising but limited initiatives in some member states. So it is vital, I think, to focus a bit more on this topic today and to hear the views of stakeholders and practitioners, experts, on how we could further develop such tools in the future. Another element that I think will be central in today's discussion is the use of databases of information on European works. As I've mentioned, this is one of the so to say, current shortcomings that have been identified, because it seems that even if some databases are used, such as the EICA or the Media Program in Database or the Lumiere database, that is a tool supported by the Commission and managed by the European Observatory, there is no common agreement on the actually the fact that these databases could be used to draw definitive conclusions that are universally accepted. Therefore, it's important to reflect a little bit on how the current tools could be further perfected in order to facilitate implementation. An important role in this context will be very likely played by right holders and producers, because these are really the actors that are in a privileged position to having access to very detailed information, such as the nationality of workers and authors. It is perhaps therefore important that providers review their contractual arrangements and to make sure that they include clauses that oblige these providers, these right holders to provide the necessary information for qualifying a work like a European one. It is not clear to what extent this is already the case today, but I think the role of right holders and producers will be crucial in the future also to increase transparency in such a complex topic. A final thought on the role of regulators, if I have the time. Very briefly, I think that the renewed mandatory character of the provisions on European works call for increased probably efforts by regulators in verifying compliance. The report flags that today, as of today, until today, the regulators rely extensively on information provided by media service providers and verify them only to a limited extent in case that inconsistency appears. Well, this approach makes a lot of sense also to avoid, of course, because the primary responsibility is for providers to provide to demonstrate that they comply with the rules. But of course, it can be imagined that regulators in the future will need to engage in further and greater verification of the accuracy of the data. And also in this respect, I would like to hear about what are the impressions from stakeholders. It might be interesting to hear the views of regulators on how this could be put in place. For example, the use of random checks or independent audits or complaint-based verifications could be useful tools to consider in this respect. Now, having said that, with this last thought, I want to thank you all for your interest in this topic and for your attention. And I look forward to listening to all contributions and learning precious insights on this very important topic for the implementation of the directive. Thank you very much.
We had a little technical issue. Thank you very much to Raffaele Di Giovanni Bezzi for this enlightening introduction, which will also help us through the debate that we are going to have with our distinguished speakers. I am Maja Capello. I am head of the Department for Legal Information of the European Audiovisual Observatory. And I had the pleasure with my team to work on this mapping report together with our international expert, Jean-François Furnemont. And the Commission, basically, when we started this work, asked us a very relevant question. How do the two pieces of regulatory frameworks work together when the issue is nationality versus, allow me this word, Europeanness? We have two pieces of legislation here. We have funding rules and we have the Audiovisual Media Services Directive. These two pieces of legislation don't speak the same language. To be national does not necessarily mean to be European, and you will hear more about this in a moment. To me, only the pleasure of giving you a bit of housekeeping rules on how this event is going to develop. We will have two snapshot presentations from the European Audiovisual Observatory introducing two rounds of discussions with our distinguished guests who come from the regulators with the CESA Belgium, from the film funds with the EFAD. We have here Julie-Jeanne Regnault and Bernardo Herman. We see them now on the screen from the CESA Belgium. We will also have representatives from the producers. We have Jérôme Deschênes from CEPI, and we have Régis Flad from the standardizing body ISAN. We also have the privilege of having three very relevant stakeholders when it comes to the distribution of media content. We have Canal+ with Christophe Roy. We have Netflix with Madeleine de Kock-Boening. And we have with Anna Soler-Bassett also Vodafone as distributor of media content, Vodafone Group. So we will discuss basically two main issues. The first one is how do we assess the nationality? How do we do this exercise? Who is involved? What is the experience of the stakeholders in this regard? And the second round will be devoted to labeling. Once the assessment exercise has been carried out, how is it possible to ensure that the same work is recognized in the same way across Europe, maybe with a common identifier, maybe through a centralized database? We will look into all this. So without further ado, I will now ask my colleague Alison Heimdorf to turn on the video presentation of my colleague Francisco Cabrera. He is the Senior Legal Analyst of the Department of Legal Information at the Observatory, with extensive experience from the universities, both in Spain and in Saarbrücken in Germany, with media law and copyright law. So as to the presentation on assessment and the two regulatory frameworks, one against each other or together, here you will see his presentation. Please go live, Alison.
Good morning, everyone. The guy with the beard here is Socrates. He supposedly said the following: the beginning of wisdom is the definition of terms. I think that every lawyer will agree with this statement. Before we can begin to discuss anything in detail, first we need to know exactly what we are talking about. We must agree on a common concept that includes certain facts while excluding others. A pear is not an apple, but they are both fruit. This also happens with the concepts that we're going to be discussing today: national and European. They are not the same. Common sense dictates that a work considered as national in a member state of the European Union will also be a European work. In theory, yes. Actually, in many cases, yes. But in practice, not in every case. And this is due to the fact that these two definitions are established by different regulatory frameworks that serve different purposes. The concept of nationality of an audiovisual work is often a requirement to have access to public support. Nationality is assessed within each country, and as such, its definition varies from country to country, even from fund to fund. Also worth noting is that the same film can have several nationalities. European works, in turn, are defined in the Audiovisual Media Services Directive. And this definition serves one purpose: to determine which audiovisual works have to be promoted by broadcasters and VOD services according to the rules of the directive. Now, our friend Socrates would ask, but what is a European work? Please define it for me. As you can see, Article 1 of the Audiovisual Media Services Directive provides for a somewhat complicated definition of what it is to be considered European work. Member states are obliged to report biannually to the European Commission on the application of Article 13, 16 and 17 of the directive. This is done by imposing a reporting obligation on broadcasters and VOD services in each country. For the vast majority of countries, media regulatory authorities are responsible for the assessment of European works for the purposes of the directive. Regulatory authorities rely generally on information provided by the service providers, that is, broadcasters and VOD services. The European Commission's guidelines are used as guiding principles in this respect. Our study shows that actual assessment is performed to a rather limited extent on a case-by-case basis, especially when the information received does not seem reliable. The main problems that regulatory authorities encounter in such assessment include the volume of data to be processed, the lack of resources on the part of the regulatory authorities, and the lack of centralized databases of audiovisual works with homogeneous indicators. In the majority of cases, the assessments are done by regulators or the relevant ministry in one case, independently of the relevant film fund institutions. However, a certain level of cooperation is reported to exist between these institutions, especially when the works are subject to national film funding or, for example, in cases where a particular work's status is unclear. Now, as I said at the beginning of this presentation, national and European work are definitions that are established by different regulatory frameworks that serve different purposes. Is this a problem? Let's say it can be a problem. In theory, at least, a film can be considered national in a European country for the purposes of obtaining public support in that country without complying with the definition of European work of the Audiovisual Media Services Directive. A particular case in this regard are co-productions between a European country and a non-European one, in cases where the European co-producer is a minority one. Another problem is to measure the problem. How many actual cases are there of discrepancy between classifications made by film bodies and regulatory authorities? Is this a real problem or a fictitious one? Now, to end this presentation and coming back to our friend Socrates, let's say that after listening to all these complicated definitional issues, I would not blame him for going all philosophical about it. Thank you.
So, this was, I think, an appetizer of all the issues that we see with regard to the definition and the assessment of the nationality of the European works. Now let's see how the stakeholders carry out this exercise in practice. Now we know the theory, and Socrates helped us in understanding this. So I would like to open the floor and with our distinguished speaker, Julie-Jeanne Regnault. She is Secretary General of the EFAD, the European Association of Film Agencies, which has been active since 2001. Before joining EFAD, Julie-Jeanne is a well-known representative of CNC, the French film agency, and she also has an extensive experience also including at the European Commission. So she has been seeing basically the topic from all possible angles, and I'm sure that she can help us shed a bit of light on how the film funds carry out this exercise. They have a big responsibility in assessing the nationality to ensure that producers can get access to the funding for their productions they're working on. But how do you do this exercise in practice? Julie-Jeanne.
Yes, Maya. Do you hear me well? Yeah, there is a terrible echo, but I will continue. Thank you for having me. Thank you for inviting the EFAD, which is actually not a stakeholder, but an association of 35 public authorities. And also thank you for the effort of everybody to summarize and try to simplify this very complex issue. Actually, there are different perspectives on what is a work, and we can say that actually film funds and regulatory authorities, they look at it with different glasses. So the film funds, they will look at a work with the perspective of giving access to national funding. So of course, they want to support domestic works. So they will consider a local, a domestic work as national, of course. But as you know, they are also interested in establishing cooperation and co-production. Co-production with other European partners, co-production with sometimes international partners. And I would say they have their own rules. Their rules are different, and that's okay. And this is a matter that is in the hand of the member states. It's a cultural policy with which countries they want to co-produce. They have sometimes bilateral agreements with these rules clearly written. The perspectives of the regulators is a bit different because they look at the qualification with the eyes and with the glasses of the AVMS directive and the definition of the AVMS directive. So these two perspectives, they have different legal frameworks. They are different, but most of the time, they are the same. take the example of what is very, very frequent, a Belgian and French co-production. It's a French work, it's a Belgian work, and of course, it would be considered as a European work. The same with Portuguese and Spain, or so many combinations, including, as it was said, countries that are parties of the Convention on Transfrontier Television. So it's a bit broader than the EU. So this is fine, this is straightforward. And you have a limited number of cases where you have a film fund that wants to give money basically to an international co-production. They are very generous. They care about making partnership with third countries. So I'm thinking Latin America, I'm thinking Canada, I'm thinking maybe Africa, Asia, so many countries they are cooperating with. And not only they will give money, even if they are minorities. So you have cases where you have a majority Canada, majority Latin America work. That will be, it's not really the nationality, by the way, if I can correct. That will be granted the national treatment, meaning they will get access to public funding. Let me give you a concrete example. Neruda is a co-production between Argentina, Chile, and France. It has been supported by the CNC. It has been agréé, meaning homologated as a French work in the French system. But actually, this cannot be a European work because it's a majority Latin American work. So this is an example of the small cases that can happen when you have a difference. Is that a problem? I don't think so. I think it's working well. The only thing is to make sure that the regulator knows that it's not because it's supported by a film fund that it has to have automatically the European qualifications. And I think that for us, what matters here, the purpose of this conversation is to see how we can make the life simpler in implementing the definition of the AVMS, because this one is also very complex. And this definition has become, as it was said by Raffaele so clearly, very strategic, because the scope of the AVMS has been enlarged. So now it applies to the quota not only for linear, but also non-linear services. So we care, you know that we've been advocating in favor of the quota so much, but we care now about the proper implementation of this quota and to avoid that non-European works would be qualified here and there as European works. So we are keen on looking at all the solutions to make the service provider's life, but also the regulator's life, simpler when they want to check whether this is or not a European work.
Thank you, Julie-Jeanne. I think I am online. You made a very important point. National treatment is not the same as nationality. And I think this is really the angle that we should not forget, because it's exactly this point that is crucial when it comes to the collaboration between film funds and regulators, because regulators have a different exercise. They have to do the second bit, namely to see which works can actually be counted for the quota obligations that are set out in the AVMS directive. And to help us shed light on this, we have with us Bernardo Herman. He is Director of EU Affairs at the Belgian Conseil Supérieur de l'Audiovisuel, that's the Belgian media regulator. And he is one of the biggest experts in this regard, also thanks to its extensive work in ERGA, the European group of media regulators in Europe, and which is competent in assisting also the European Commission with expertise. So, Bernardo, you have a difficult task here, namely to help us understand how you carry out this exercise. How do you assess it? Which data do you use? Check them? Do you rely on what you receive? Do you collaborate with film funds? Many questions here. Ball over to you.
Okay. Thank you so much. And thank you first for having me, of course. And I'm impressed by the list of questions that you are putting in front of me. I will then give you the view of the operational guy, if you wish, the operational guy on the field. And as it had been said, our main job as regulator of the audiovisual, our main job is to check, of course, that media players are filling in the quotas of European works. As regards the financial contribution to the production of European works, our duty is to calculate the amount to be paid to the French-speaking Community Film Fund or to be invested directly in co-production schemes. Practically, from a cooperation point of view, as regards the financial contribution, we are actually defining the amount to be mentioned on the bill. The Community Film Fund is sending the bill and collecting the money. That's easy. There is then a lot of exchanges by mail or phone calls between the two institutions. When we are checking media players' compliance with quota obligations, we are referring to many sources to identify the nationality of the works. These sources have been mentioned in the lovely report from the observatory. Among these sources, you find the declaration from the media players, which is used as a starting point of the supervision process. I have to say that there is a high level of trust between the regulators team and the media services. We used to ask them to provide us with a random sample of a 4 weeks program, so which can be already quite an heavy package, of course. But some are exceeding our expectations through providing us with a full year program. So it is a kind of tsunami of works that we get then. Then we are undertaking our own research, including through consulting the Lumière database. The reports of the French-speaking Community Film Fund are used also as a reference among others. These reports, if you wish, benefit from a kind of rebutable presumption that works which are qualified as Belgian should be European, of course. But, you know, at the same time, we are aware that the reality could be different, as it has been highlighted in the observatory report. The conditions for being an eligible work for funding purpose can be more specific and not matching the AVMSD definition, so we have to be cautious. Overall, we have few litigations with these regards, also because the media players used to exceed the quotas, which is a quite comfortable situation, of course. So in case of doubt, and we know that there is an array of options for determining the work's nationality, when we are confronted to a more difficult case, it is true that, if possible, we put the case aside and we consider whether the service provider can fill in the quota with the so-called undisputable works. It's easy, but I don't know for how long we will be able to play this game. We know that when we are deepening our research, we will find that some databases are using different criteria. To be fully transparent, we use the same tactic on other similar but different topics when we have to decide whether to include or not some sensitive categories, if you wish, like porn, for instance. I know that there is a debate on this, but you know, in my view, audiovisual works should include dialogues where you can find a complete sentence with a subject, a verb, and a complement. This is not always the case with porn, as you know, but that is another story. But just to show you that we can also have some fun with this kind of debates. Now, it is clear that given the problems mentioned by Francisco, for example, we would welcome an automatized system for making this kind of control. Obviously, we are lacking human resources to carry out a full and exhaustive assessment. Even when we are working with samples, it can be overwhelming. In our dreams, an advanced version of a unified database could be offering a kind of software for making the job. We are in favor of AI. To this end, we would need harmonized criteria, of course, which can be quite challenging, as it has been said before. That's what I was willing to share with you. And of course, we can continue the conversation with these regards.
Thank you, Bernardo. I like very much this exercise of putting aside the undisputable works, so that you see how you can achieve the quota with what is sure, and then you put aside. Did I get it right? When you talked about dialogues, were you referring to porn?
Yeah. I mean,
yeah. So that would qualify as European works. Okay, well, be careful that you
The
have it
point is
in
that
the
there is a debate between different regulators with these regards, but for the time being, we did not decide on that.
Okay, we'll keep that for a separate conference where we might also discuss these issues. So we've been now seeing the institutional setting with regulators and film funds for the assessment, but let's now take a step back and take a look at the producers. In the end, you are the creators of these works, and we have here with us Jérôme Deschênes. He is Assistant Delegate General at the French Union for Audiovisual Production, USPA, and currently President of the European Coordination of Independent Producers, CEPI. He has a long experience in this field and gives voice to the many independent producers across Europe. So who better than Jérôme to help us answer the question on which data related to the assessment of the nationality of European works are required from your point of view? How do you proceed in this regard when you define, let's say, the list of your deliverables for the production? So how does your day look like, Jérôme? The floor is yours. I think you are muted. You should turn your mic on. So I propose the following. I switch the order. I let you, Jérôme, try to check the sound system, and I anticipate Régis Flade. Régis is Managing Director at ISAN, the international standard agency, which is responsible for promoting the adoption of the ISAN standard worldwide for the centralized ISAN registry. I don't know how many are familiar with the work of ISAN. It's very much a work behind the scenes, but extremely important when it comes to the development of an identifier for the works so that they can easily be distributed and recognized as such with a unique number. So I would leave to you, Régis, the honor of shedding light on this a bit mysterious work for maybe not everyone who is used to this very technical aspect of the definition of nationality. So without much further ado, I leave the floor to you, Régis.
Thank you, Maya. Can you all hear me?
Yes, you're okay. Perfect.
Great. Thanks a lot. So thank you, Maya, for this introduction. I will not make an extensive presentation of what ISAN is, but please, you're welcome to refer to www.isan.org to have more information. I will rather concentrate on our topic here, which is the nationality assessment. So ISAN is an audiovisual standard. It's a standard for delivering a unique identifier for audiovisual work. And in doing so, ISAN is collecting information coming from producers and is building a database and has a database and is therefore also a source of information, a possible source of information, among others, that can then help to assess the nationality of works according to certain rules. And it's not only that, but because it's an international standard that is usable by everyone, it can also bring solutions to automate process and to reduce considerably the human effort that is required to process huge volumes of data. So it's worth to note that the ISAN database as a source of information is a limited set of data. It's limited to the minimum information that is required by our job, which is to deliver unique identifiers. So ISAN is an ISO standard, and because producers are the main authoritative source of information, ISO, who has developed the ISAN standard, has defined that ISAN identifier should be registered by producers. So we are working very closely with producers. To issue ISAN, producers are submitting descriptive information of the audiovisual work, such as titles, year, duration, cast and crew, country of productions, and so on. And then this information is compared to all other data that is stored in the ISAN registry, and a new ISAN is issued if the work is not yet registered. So indeed, the ISAN dataset contains a certain information that can give indications to assess the nationality of a work. These data fields are often optional because when it comes to assess and to deduplicate registrations, these fields are usually not the most relevant. But however, the information that we have in our database are country of productions, countries of shooting, name of film found institution in some cases, name of cast and crew, and important as well are links to other databases that contains also information, and such databases like other standard identifier, there is another one, the IDER, links to IMDb, and to some media service providers, producers, and so on. So the country of production is probably the most relevant field for assessing the nationality. So as I said, it's an optional field. However, this data is often provided in Europe, notably for recent production. But not all production countries are registered in ISAN. And sometimes you will only find the country of the producers that register, that has made the registration. So ISAN is not reviewing and reworking this information. We consider that it is authoritative because it comes from the producer, so it is information as is. In some countries, we have been asked that the country of production is made mandatory for production in their country. So we have come up with a new ISAN system this year, and we have added this option. And as of next year, we will start making this field mandatory in countries where this is required. So this will be the case, for example, as from next year in Switzerland, but also Germany, and other countries can then follow. So ISAN is usually delivered to finished production, but can also apply to projects. We have many film founding organizations in Europe, but also elsewhere, that are already requiring ISAN for the project they finance, and this at all stage, writing, production, or distribution. And in that context, we deliver a project ISAN. And project ISAN is an ISAN that we already delivered before the content is completed, and that is then activated later on when the content is finished. And activating means that the final information is inserted in the ISAN database and that this information is made public to everyone. I will finish with the fact that ISAN is a voluntary standard, and because of that, not all producers are registering their work with ISAN. So far we have 1.4 million ISAN that have been delivered to 15,000 producers from 80 countries, but there are differences from one European country to another, and the best coverage is in countries where ISAN obligations have been enforced, either by regulators, film founding institutions, or by industry stakeholders such as CMO for rights processing. So more incentives or requirements at national or European level of using ISAN through the industry would not only increase the ISAN coverage, but also provide more incentives for an exhaustive documentation of these optional fields that are helpful for assessing the nationality of audiovisual works.
Thank you, Regis. I think you pointed the finger to many important keywords here. First of all, a tool can work only if it is used. So as long as it is just voluntary and nobody engages in the game, there is a little future for a tool to be accepted. The more it is used, the more it becomes alive. And you are indeed doing an important work with regard to these different fields. ISAN makes the country of production as one of the fields, but it's also called, I think, if I'm not mistaken, country of reference, which adopts also a variety of criteria, which don't necessarily match with other identifiers, and that's exactly the problem here. There are many different identifiers on the market. You mentioned EIDR, there is IMDb, there are other private companies. So the main issue here is how to make them talk to each other and make them interoperable. We will come back to that later. But before that, I would like to now give Jérôme Deschênes another chance to tune in. I hope the sound issues have been solved in the meantime and that we can now give... Yes, we can hear you. That's wonderful. So Jérôme, I already introduced you, so I will not repeat. I launch directly the floor to you.
Okay, thank you. Hello, everybody. I have the impression that it's already 10 times what I say that, but hello, everybody now, if you hear me. Thank you for your kind invitation. CEPI is a coordination of independent and European producers. Actually, we have plenty of members which are national associations active in all that topics. This topic is crucial now because, as Julian mentioned, It has been extended to on-demand services, and it is a question that in the 30% of European works, at least for online services, you can imagine that there is a stress about this definition, because 30%, it is a minor percentage. It is not a majority of the offer, which must be European, but a minority one, at least. So how does it function? You highlight the fact that we have two systems, the public funds in one hand and the quotas in another hand. For us, it is important to understand that there is no problem. There is no need of harmonization between these two systems because the aims are different. In one hand, the public funds accessibility, they are free to determine their own rules because it is a public policy in order to help by public funds to finance works. So they are free to determine things, and I must say that nationality is only one topic of this crucial topic about public funds. The other end, it's for quotas of production and promotion. And so the directive is mentioning mainly made. What does it mean? It means that in so many countries in Europe, we have determined points categories for recognition of nationality, by which the authors, the director, and the actors, for instance, and of course the staff, you have points if they are European, these individuals. So this is the main system we have in Europe. In some countries in which we don't have quotas of production, like in Ireland, we don't have a definition of Irish works. So it could be a problem in these countries also. But to be clear also in that topic, we have to determine the fact that it is a majority of finance. Of course, the case of in which an European co-producer is minority is not a problem for public funds, but it could be for the quotas. Because for the quotas, the aim is just to put for the audience something which is representing European culture, European languages, and European IP. For that, the prerequisite, which is linked to the production company, is clear. It must be produced by a European company. But saying that, we mention the fact that we have a big problem to solve altogether, because we have no distinction in the AVMS directive between what we can call the executive production and the delegate production. It means that we are focused only on the financing, but we are not focused on the IP at the end of the day. Where are the IP rights after the financing? And so for us, it is crucial to begin to understand that we need to reinforce the definition of what is a European production by reinforcing or introducing a concept of independent production, meaning the fact that at the end of the day, where are the IP rights? How can we consider an investment coming from international platforms? Okay, produce and shoot in Europe, but at the end of the day, with all the IP in the hands of extra-European platforms, services, or groups. This is a real question, and we have to address this question. But
I think you pointed to indeed one of the big issues. I know you've been working on this for a long time, and we also had a specific conference on independent production some time ago, organized by the Observatory. It's we won't have the time today to go into detail into this, but I would like to just to recall what you said about the points and the categories in order to qualify the work. So from your side, I guess there is also a lot of work being done when you apply for the funding, both before the production exists and when the production is produced and has to be distributed. And there, the forms that you will have to fill in also oblige you to provide certain data, which are then put into the information flow, which then continues down on the value chain. And it's exactly this journey I would like to embark on now, moving on to the audiovisual media service providers that we have here with us today, who happen also to be producers. So they have a bit this double hat, which I think is just perfect for the setting today. And I would like to start with Canal+. We have with us Christophe Roy. He is Director of European Affairs and Deputy Legal Director of France Legal Department at Canal+ Group. And he has a history in working both in the telecommunications and the broadcast media industries. So he really knows how things work. And I feel very privileged that we can take benefit of both his experience and of Canal+, of this double hat. So I think our audience would be very much interested in hearing more about your concrete experience in the field. How do you label your works? How do you present them in your catalog? How do you attract the viewers? How do you make them understand that what they are going to watch is actually European? And is the information that you receive from the previous moments of the workflow helpful to you when you have to carry out this exercise? Christophe, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Maja, and good morning to everyone. I hope you hear me well. Thank you very much for this invitation to this conference. We are very happy to participate to this debate because this topic addressed today of qualification of works is of particular relevance for Canal+ Group, as you just mentioned. Financing and broadcasting of European works is in the DNA of Canal+ Group. This, of course, results from the fact that our group was born in France 36 years ago, a country that is well known for supporting an ambitious cultural policy, the famous exception culturelle. And this cultural policy has been translated over the years into a comprehensive and a set of regulation and obligations concerning the promotion of European works, both for broadcasters and on-demand services. Among other things, Canal+ Group, like all the players established in France, has to secure a share of at least 60% of European works, including a 40% share of domestic works on its linear and non-linear services. And in addition, of course, we have to observe strict rules regarding the prominence of those works. So I don't think I will be mistaken if I say that France is a country with the most binding regulation in this area, much more restricted than or ambitious than the European standard, providing a 30% share of European works in the AVMS directive. And beyond its home country, France, Canal+ Group also has been expanding its European identity for several years. And the group today has become the first European pay TV leader with 20 million subscribers in 40 countries, in which we invest 3.2 billion euros in content each year, and we make progressively available our digital platform, MyCanal. So all of this participates in reinforcing our strategy and ambition to spread the European culture.
And how do you do this in practice in your catalogs? Now I'm curious. How do you do it with How do you do it with your catalogs? How do you ensure that this is then made visible in your catalogs online?
Yeah, I come to that. I mean, the qualification of European works is a component of all the businesses of Canal+ Group, the broadcaster, the producer, and the distributor. So on our channels and online services, we respect these very high quotas and prominence obligation. And if you go on our services, VOD services, or on our channels, you will see very clearly and very prominently all the European works, either films or series, because as I said, I mean, this is really what we want to bring to our customers. The specific question that you raised on the cohabitation between nationality qualification for funding purposes and the quota obligations relates more directly to the activity of Studio Canal, the group subsidiary specialized in producing and distributing films and series. Studio Canal is both a distributor and a producer, and I just want to say a few words about its activity of producer. When Studio Canal is a producer, he is responsible for ensuring that European qualification criteria are met and that European qualification forms are completed as part of the approval procedure with the CNC, the French National Film Fund, to get public funding. However, the qualification, it was recalled at the beginning of this conference, the qualification of a European work for the purpose of compliance with the AVMS directive is carried out by the CSA, the Sectorial Regulatory Authority, independently of the CNC, the National Film Fund. This means that a work can be qualified as an audiovisual work, a European work by the CSA for broadcasting purposes and investment quotas, and not by the CNC for public funding. But in practice, we do not encounter major issues in this regard. The CSA tends to be more flexible, which means that it is highly likely that when you get the European qualification at the CNC for work, you will get it also for the CSA. Of course, things can be a little more tricky for co-productions, especially with non-EU countries. But here we don't have much experience because much of our co-productions, either for films and series, are really purely European. And in any case, even if we engage into co-productions with non-EU countries, the rules are quite clear, public, and known. You can find them on the CNC site, and it's not. We also have the chance in France to have bilateral agreements. We mentioned these bilateral agreements, and we have them with the majority of countries in the world. So it's not so difficult to determine the qualification of the work.
I think indeed you raised a good point there that France has the most complex regulatory framework, but it's also very helpful in ensuring that for the producers the net of security, let's say, is very well developed. And you mentioned European and beyond. This makes me move over to our next speaker, who has indeed a pan-European approach. We are lucky today, and we have with us Madeleine de Kock-Boening. She is Vice President, Public Policy Europe, Middle East and Africa of Netflix, a well-known audiovisual media service provider for many of us, I think. And Madeleine has a long-standing experience both from academia and from the institutional sector, coming from the Dutch media regulator, the Commissariat for the Media, and also having chaired ERGA, the European Group of Regulators. So as well, an excellent panelist who knows the topic in and out. So welcome, Madeleine. And we are, of course, very curious to know about what is the approach of Netflix. We see that Netflix as well has this double hat of producer and distributor. The issue of executive productions, delegated productions that we had heard is one of the certainly of the aspects, but most importantly, how is the exercise that you do in order to label your productions and also what you distribute that come from third parties? Madeleine.
Thank you so much. It's so wonderful to be here and to see all of you. It's really amazing. And also the initiative is really very to the point, because of course we as Netflix are working very hard on this. But before we go into that, I would really like to reiterate our commitment to European content. And also, even during COVID-19, we were able to be pretty resilient in our European productions. So this quarter, some of our most successful and long-running European original TV shows came to a close. For instance, Dark in Germany, Chicas del Cable in Spain, The Rain in Denmark, Baby in Italy, and even more European content is coming your way. For instance, Barbarian from Germany, Lupin from France, Into the Night from Belgium, The Witcher Season 2, The Life Ahead with Sofia Loren in Italy, Rose Island, Italy, Equinox, Denmark, and Ragnarok in second season in Norway. So we're so excited that we can still be doing this with very careful strategy to make sure our crews are super safe. But it's there, and we keep on working on European content because we're so committed. And honestly, I really love that. And so, you know, we are very much aware of the fact that all this content has to be accounted for. And so how do we determine the nationality of audiovisual works at Netflix? So it provides challenges. I have to be honest and transparent about that. And I think also for that, the observatory report is really excellent in mapping the challenges we also see. But we do believe that determining whether or not the work is in for the purpose of compliance with the Audiovisual Media Service Directive or for the purpose of different national definitions is generally feasible. So we're optimistic. And mostly, of course, for our productions and co-productions with those many of our European partners, this is easier since we have enough information mostly. We can ascertain the producer or the ones that we're working with, the role of the producer, especially in case of multiple producers, and the information is available to us. More challenging is obviously our license titles. That information is really not always available, especially when we buy larger libraries. Then it is quite a challenge to find out exactly the nationality of these works and how it actually works. So I would like to point that out for us, that is in fact the challenge. And there is no universal solution, of course, tagging of national European works. And therefore we in practice, and I must say I was amazed by seeing that there is quite a lot of man hours and efforts that are really put into the effort of us as a company to capture the existing definition as closely as possible, but also to collect all the metadata that we need. And we're rolling out, and this is really a question of moving pieces, additional methods to capture the relevant metadata for exactly that assessment. So that's one thing. On the other hand, of course, we are localized and have our headquarters in the Netherlands. So for the European quota, we have great conversation with the Dutch Media Authority through our Jasmijn, who is working as our Benelux head of public policy. She worked with the regulator to find out their criteria. And as you might know, the Dutch have implemented only very recently, a few weeks ago, the Audiovisual Media Service Directive in the Dutch Media Act. So it is also a matter of the regulator now being in the process of defining exactly what we are supposed to do. So we are in a good conversation with them, but it's of course up to them to decide how to take care of that. And well, obviously we are, like I have already expressed, rather optimistic about the way we will be able to work with the regulator. And also, although there are a lot of different national definitions as well, relevant for the 13.2 audiovisual media service implementation we are seeing popping up in many national countries, we will be able to subtract those relevant elements from there to go forward. So I don't see gigantic problems on that, but of course, all that manual work that will be required, it will be much better if we will have a more harmonized approach. We have more data points that we can actually use and be more certain about the fact that what we are doing is really spot on, because we're committed to be spot on and to be reporting in the best possible way. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Madeleine. Indeed, the need for harmonization and approximation of the criteria, I think this is one of the elements that you all have in common here. You all want to do your job in the best way possible, but of course the scattered framework of both rules and identifiers doesn't make it easier. And you also pointed to the important issue of the difficulties when you buy bigger libraries of finding the information. And here is also exactly the point that distributors and aggregators have in common. One thing is when you produce yourself, and of course you know who you're producing with, but quite different when you buy a more massive amount of content, and then the jungle of information is not always easy to go through. So
can I add one more point to that? Because honestly, we would love to spend all of our time in really creating beautiful content together with those great European producers, more than spending man hours on the nitty-gritty details of finding out all the differences.
I imagine. We have with us, though, a more, let's say, a pure distributor. We have with us Vodafone with Anna Solar-Bassett from Vodafone Group. She is leading Vodafone's government affairs for content policy at global group level and working also on a wide range of reforms. And we will be hearing from Anna what is Vodafone TV. This is maybe also a player that not everyone is yet familiar with, but getting a stronger importance on the market. So this leads me to the question of what do distributors do in this context? What is your role in ensuring that the nationality of the European works, or the Europeanness, let's say, of European works is brought up to the light? Can you tell us about Vodafone's experience in this regard, Anna? The floor is yours.
Brilliant, thanks you so much. And just checking my line's coming through okay?
All good.
Wonderful, wonderful. So thank you. We're definitely delighted to be here, and congratulations to you on a very detailed report. It's a technical but very important area. Just a little about Vodafone TV as background. For some of you that may not know, but most of you will know, we are one of Europe's largest converged pay TV operators. We're committed to and very passionate about the distribution of your content. So in terms of our services, we provide TV via cable, IPTV, mobile and OTT platforms, including integration of HBO, Amazon Video, etc. We have over 22 million TV customers across 10 European markets, and more we're committed to globally. We are actually the first internet video product to blend content into one cross-stream video browsing platform. And we provide linear content in all of our TV markets, as well as on-demand in both of these. We're also, of course, one of the world's leading telecommunications and technology service providers. And we think this report is a really timely contribution. There's obviously tectonic shifts in the audiovisual sector, the AVMSD, but of course the wider shifts of digitization. And I think the rising popularity of powerful non-European OTT platforms with, shall we say, deep pockets means that a level playing field for us is a really sustainable prerequisite to competition, so that we can ensure that there's actual ongoing cultural diversity in EU broadcasting. In terms of some examples of how we do assessment, to promote European diversity, of course, for example, we create dedicated areas where customers can easily identify and access European content. Even before the revised directive, for example, in Portugal, our TV proposition included dedicated content libraries for Made in Portugal libraries, and also French film libraries, of course, in high demand. Vodafone and other video on demand providers were also naturally incentivized by commercial imperative to provide customers with legible, transparent, and easy to use TV intervals, of course, as well as search and recommendation engines. We can easily adapt these features to improve discoverability of European content. So, for example, some of you might have seen, to build on our success as a content aggregator, Vodafone Spain has actually offered an online recommendation service featuring interviews with local Spanish celebrities who do interviews and recommend their favorite shows and content. And alongside this, we've built in an algorithm, a smart algorithm, which then also suggests content recommendations based on parameters that you'd expect, such as titles that have been successful in relation to similar themes, titles which are trending on social networks, or titles which are achieving a high score on relevant sites, IMDb, Filmfinity, and so on. In terms of labeling, of course, we can come to it in more detail in the debate. A central database could, in theory, be helpful for these issues, but only if the difficult issue so cogently highlighted by the rest of the speakers around a standard identifiers with buy-in from industry, particularly rights holders. We drew attention again in this respect to the fact that as distributors, pure distributors of third-party content, we and other distributors are not necessarily in a position to qualify whether programs we distribute qualify as European works. We're not directly involved in program production. It is really essential that licensors of on-demand content declare where the works they're licensing originate from, not only in their license agreements, but we draw attention again to the vexed issue of program metadata. As distributors, we do really rely on this information in order to be able to comply with our compliance obligations around European works. And I think the EAO report very cogently draws attention to the fact, as did Giovanni in his opening remarks of the Commission, that in its final form, the directive falls short of imposing this requirement. We're not necessarily convinced that the mere encouragement in recital 35 is necessarily sufficient. Having called on the Commission to reflect and to the extent possible strengthen this provision, we also repeat our hope that Member States will continue to take heed of this issue during implementation. And I can come back to some of our ideas perhaps about good metadata practice during the debate. We'd also like again to call attention to situations where licensors do not provide requisite information to licensees. In this scenario, we believe it's only fair that as distributors, we should be permitted to attempt to self-certify. Again, by relying on program metadata, for example, country of production, etc., other publicly available information. We strongly believe distributors acting in good faith should not be held liable for any errors or omissions on the part of licensors to certify the origins of a work. But before we get into the detail of some of this in the debate, just want to reiterate, similar to a European company, committed to continental film and TV, very excited to continue to contribute to broadcast diversity in Europe. And we think this research report is really important in advancing the conversation about how we best promote European content, voices, and stories.
Thank you, Anna, for sharing the point of view of Vodafone and the different perspective from the distributor side. I see there is an item that pops up regularly, that is the licenses and the information and how to access that in order to best place them in the catalog. And I'm sure this would also help the recommendation system and the algorithms work better when all this information was centralized and grouped. So this brings me now to kick off our debate on the very concrete item of the labeling. And to let all of you rest a little bit, we will now have a snapshot presentation from the observatory, where you will see all these different identifiers, get a bit an idea of how the concrete life behind the scene, also, let's say, the nitty-gritty paperwork, but which is so important because from a little tick the box, the life of a production can go in one direction or another. So we launch now the little video, a few minutes, and we come back to the discussion on possible ways forward.
Good morning and welcome to this presentation on stakeholders, identifiers and databases. As part of our nationality mapping, we have asked several industry stakeholders to give us their insight. Most of them were broadcasters, public and private, and video-on-demand services. We wanted to know what was their experience in determining whether works contained in their catalogs qualified as European works. We also wanted to know if they have developed any practices to help make that determination, and whether they use any existing tools for that purpose. All respondents declare that there are no homogeneous data on nationality from the different national sources. most respondents suggested to create a pan-European qualification standard and/or a centralized database for the nationality of films and audiovisual works. Some respondents complain that the information necessary to assess whether a work is European was not always included in the metadata provided by the licensor. The problem with a centralized database is that not all countries assess the nationality of all films and audiovisual works. Equally, different countries may assign different nationalities to a same work, and more importantly, a European national work is not necessarily European in the sense of the Audiovisual Media Services Directive. Furthermore, most respondents inform of occasional difficulties in identifying the nationality of films and audiovisual works, and several stakeholders always require this information from the licensor. Some stakeholders did an assessment themselves based on the directive's definition of European work when the nationality was unclear. Most respondents declared that they use one or more external sources to assess the nationality of works in their catalogs. These can be standards identifiers such as ISAN or IDER, or databases such as IMDb, Cine Europa, Europa Cinemas, or the European Commission's one. The revised Audiovisual Media Services Directive from 2018 encourages in Recital 35 that labeling should be used in metadata of audiovisual content that qualifies as European work and be made available to media service providers. For instance, in the case of ISAN, there is the indicator of country of reference, which is a proxy of that of nationality. In the case of IDER, for instance, country of origin refers to the country of establishment of the production countries. This often, but not necessarily, coincide with the nationality of the works. Moreover, this information is usually provided by the registrants with limited checking capacity by ISAN or IDER. Respondents also declared to use online databases to verify the nationality of films and audiovisual works. IMDb includes the production companies involved and their nationality, but not necessarily the nationality of the film or audiovisual work itself. Other online tools take the information from a variety of sources, such as Cine Europa's database. And in some cases, such as Europa Cinemas and the EACEA film database, do the assessment themselves based on their own definitions. Moreover, these last databases include only theatrical films and not audiovisual works. For the final remarks, it is to be noted that there is no homogeneous definition of nationality, neither among countries, nor among databases and standard identifiers. The fact that a film or audiovisual work is considered national in a European country does not guarantee it is European in the sense of the Audiovisual Media Services Directive. And last, the information available, the metadata, to assess whether a work is European is not always available. Nationality is not a mandatory field in standard identifiers. Thank you very much for your attention. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact me. I hope this triggered some interesting discussion.
So, as you will have seen, the forms are many, the fields are different, and we have more than one identifier. So the idea now for this remaining part of our conference will be devoted to what could be a possible way forward. how can we put in place a virtual circle that can help all stakeholders play their role and institutions work in the best way possible in order to make this overarching goal of promotion of European works and circulation of the works as well achieved. So we started a bit later because of our little technical problem. And we are also a little bit behind schedule. So I will now mix a bit with the questions that we are receiving from the audience while also involving each of you during the discussion. So I will keep it a bit fluid. So please follow me. I would like to maybe start, since this is a bit natural after having heard about the identifiers, with Régis again, so that he can further expand on what would be his proposal on a possible way forward. And at the same time, I can anticipate a question that we receive from the Media Desk Luxembourg, which I address to you, Régis, which is, do you exchange information with EIDR? So is there any communication between the different standard operators and these bodies? Do you talk? Do you call your colleagues? Régis, over to you.
Yes, so thanks a lot for starting this round with me. There is indeed no general to all the questions that were raised here, but there is one certitude from my perspective, is that standard IDs and ISAN are great tools to navigate through the jungles of available data and databases that are used for assessing the nationality. And this is feasible thanks to the concept of linked data, where sparse databases information can be linked with unique identifiers. So, as you mentioned, there are different standards identifiers, and there are two major identifiers, which is the ISAN and the IDER. And I will directly answer to your question. Yes, we are talking together. ISAN and IDER are talking together. But shortly, the difference between the two IDs. So ISAN is prominently used in Europe, and IDER is prominently used in the USA. And over the past years, we have made a great work together with the European Commission, and thanks to them, we have initiated a work of discussion and interoperability, and this answers the question. And as a first step, we have released the first step of interoperability. We have identified how we could work together. So the good way forward is to interconnect our database through our identifiers, so cross-referencing. So we are adding ISAN numbers in the ISAN database, and IDER is IDER numbers in the ISAN database, and IDER is adding ISAN number in their database, among other identifiers like IMDb and others. And actually, since last year, we have reached a first milestone, which is to deliver a first service, a dual registration service, where registrant can obtain the two identifiers, and in that, in a single process. So that's one of the area where we are discussing when we are delivering.
We need to keep the interventions a bit brief. So sorry for interrupting you, but I would like to build on this this concept of the interoperability, because this is of course also crucial for how the different stakeholders can interact. And I would like now to call up Jérôme from CEPI, so that he can also help me address another question that I'm receiving here, which I see related to the issue, which is the following. The exploitation rights are sometimes split between different content providers depending on the market. Providers can have a different country of origin for the same works due to the different national definitions that you've mentioned. What is the guidance? And linked to this, can the identifiers be helpful as a guidance for dealing with this aspect? What is your view on this, Jérôme? From the producer side, of course. Sound. You are mute.
Okay, definitely for the identifiers is key question. So as producers now, we consider that everywhere in Europe mainly we have ISAN or IDER. IDER is really everywhere in Scandinavia, for instance, but In many countries, it's ISAN. But it's linked to transparency. The transparency made by all producers about the condition of the financing has been solved in the last years. So now it's clear that we need an identifiers to say that these informations could be shared with everyone. So we did the job, and now we need to have interoperability and we need to have access. To clarify also the nationality, I think it's clear that when we have competition between systems, we must define the rule of the country of origin. And the country of origin, we must take into consideration the preponderation of the financing. So I think based on that, we could have a consolidated database which could be useful for everyone. So it's not an harmonization that I suggest, only the rule of the country of origin. Having said that, I want to say something which is not a question. It is pretty clear that we are discussing about the definition of European works, and for sure we didn't discuss about this case of UK works. UK works are linked, will be considered in 2021 as European because of a Transfrontier Television Convention. But this Transfrontier Convention before was linked to Ukraine and Turkey. But it is also clear that these quotas are also to define a fair competition between all the players. And we have at least to address in our sector, it's a collective responsibility. We have at least to make an impact assessment of this topic. Because when we're talking about UK works, we're talking about, and it is the data coming from the observatory, 50% of market share on TVOD. We are talking about a country which is making 2/3 of the catalogs and the market share in online services. So we have to secure a fair competition between our countries in European Union and the UK, especially about the tax credit issue and so on. So it is not a question.
Sorry for interrupting you, because this was also a question that was raised. Hello from Paris. Would you please let us know whether UK productions still qualify as European with Brexit? So indeed, it's the elephant in the room. So I would like to call on this, maybe the help of the Commission. So we have Raffaele Di Giovanni Bezzi here with us, and we have also Emmanuel Joly, also from DG Connect, who will do the closing remarks. But I would maybe ask a little bit of assistance here from Raffaele. Is there any clue on what is the way forward on this topic?
Hello. Yes, I think that well, this is not an easy topic, of course, and I apologize in advance.
I know, that's why I'm happy to hand it over.
If it will be short of formative value in my answer. Of course, what I can say for sure is that the answer is yes, in the sense that works originating in the United Kingdom as a member of the European Council Convention Transfrontier Television, they will qualify regularly as European works according to the definition that is currently in the AVMSD. Of course, I take note of the invitation of Jérôme of the need to make an overall assessment of this, and yeah, I mean, this is certainly food for thought, but indeed I would not elaborate too much on Brexit issues in this respect, because simply I cannot. And of course, I mean, if Emmanuel wishes to add something from, I can.
Yeah, maybe Emmanuel Joly, do you want to add something with regard to the Creative Europe program, on how the situation looks from your point of view? Just to remind our audience that within DG Connect, of course, there are several units, and Raffaele comes from the unit dealing with the AVMS directive, and Emmanuel Joly from the one dealing with the Creative Europe program, all the funding issues. So, of course, here we have again the two legs, AVMSD and funding. So, Emmanuel Joly, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Maya. I hope you hear me.
We do.
Yes. As has been said by several people intervening today, the situation of public funding is different than regulation. For the purpose of public funding, and I take the example of media, we somehow support the works we want, we choose. For example, through media are considered as works of minimum duration, 60 minutes for feature films, 24 minutes for TV animation. We exclude certain types of content, TV games, talk shows, etc., promotional materials, and of course, pornographic content we don't support. This was a question evoked before. But then what's important?
And what about the UK works? Do they receive support?
Sorry, so the
and what
term
about the UK works? Do they receive support?
Exactly. This is where I want to come now. In fact, we support works, potentially are eligible works with involving a significant participation of people coming from countries participating in the media program. And among these countries, we have the EU 28 until the end of this program, but in the new program, it will be EU 27 only because of Brexit. We have also Norway and Iceland and 5 neighboring countries, Albania, Bosnia, North Macedonia, Montenegro, and Republic of Serbia. So to answer your question, in the future, since on top of Brexit, the UK has not shown any interest to participate in Creative Europe in the future in the frame of the FTA negotiations, UK works will not be supported by media as from next year in the new program.
Okay, well, thanks a lot for this. So basically, no money, but yes in the catalog. That's, I think, is the wrap-up of the situation for the moment, and then we will see what the future will look like. I think it's a crystal ball that is a bit difficult to access right now. So I would maybe move forward and continue on the issue of the concrete possible solutions. I'm receiving quite many comments in support of easing this work of labels. So I would maybe like to hear back again from Julie-Jeanne Regnault and Bernardo Herman what they think from their institutional perspective, if this could be a helpful way forward. The observatory is also handling an important database, Lumière and Lumière VOD, that is providing access to a variety of works. And I have with me also my colleague Gilles Fontaine, who might take the floor and give a little insight on what could be also a possible way forward from our side. But before we jump on board on that, I would like to get a bit the temperature from the film funds and the regulators, since you have been called upon on board. Julie-Jeanne, do you want to start?
Yes, thank you, Maya. Well, and indeed, we believe in the need of a European database where actually we will find this information collected, put together, the information that will help basically Netflix, Amazon, and the regulator to check whether a work is European. I heard Madeleine with attention, and it was funny because she reminded very precisely that actually the Netherlands will be in charge, the Dutch regulator will be in charge of checking the respect of the 30% in all European countries where Netflix is available. You can imagine the job in the hands of the Dutch regulator. And we need to help him. We need to help the Dutch regulator to quickly check whether indeed there are European works in what Netflix is labeling as European. For the moment, we know this labeling is not done properly. I was doing a little research on my Netflix and my Amazon, typing European works, European films, and I was like very amazed to see that we are at the beginning of labeling them properly. And I totally sympathize with the fact that Madeleine wants to be a bit supported in that exercise, and I think it's totally normal. Just 10 seconds to just say that coming back to what Jérôme said about the definition, still focusing on the AVMS definition. And currently the definition, doesn't promote independent production. We have a situation where US streamers, they will invest, they will produce in Europe, but actually they will keep all the IPs in their hands, and still it will be European works. And I think the reflection around, do we want this situation to continue? Roberto Ola said 2 days ago in a FERA talks, well, actually, we are not the owner anymore of the works we create in Europe. And I think this is maybe for another conference, but I wanted to finish on that after stressing again the need for maybe building on the Lumière VOD, have this database that could incorporate the ISAN. ISAN is used by most film funds. We oblige right holders to have an ISAN number in several countries. So ISAN is also a good tool, but there are all the sources that could be incorporated in a European database. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Julie-Jeanne. I will let you all know a little bit more about the Lumière database from my colleague after Bernardo, but now I would like to hear what is his point of view with regard to the possible way forward. How would you like us, everyone, help your job? Because it's indeed a quite complex exercise that is on the shoulders of regulators. So if you can turn your mic on, we will all be able to hear from you.
Okay, thank you so much for the question. But, you know, as I ended my short statement a few minutes ago, 30 minutes ago, we are clearly in favor of a centralized database, because as I said, you know, checking all these files, all these works can quickly be a help for the people on the ground who are operating this. And actually, also we see that our markets are increasingly targeted. They are increasingly targeted. So this work will be only increasing as well. And we are also considering to which extent we could say that some video sharing platforms are targeting our market as well. So, you know, we see that the workload will be really impressive and is already impressive. So we are definitely in favor of a centralized database. And also, as I said, I think we should have automatized tools to check this. So we are in favor of artificial intelligence tools to do that.
Indeed, it seems also to me that a machine-to-machine approach could be helpful also for small regulators. I mean, this maybe Madeleine can help us remember, but I'm not sure the Commissariat for the Media has thousands of employees who can do this work, or the CSA in Belgium. It's the problem of staff to be involved. It is important, and if technology can be helpful, why not? And let's see how the observatory can maybe help in this regard. I would now like to call my colleague Gilles Fontaine. He is head of Department for Market Information of the European Audiovisual Observatory, and can maybe enlighten us a bit on Lumière database.
Thank you, Maya. Yes, we have some modest experience in the matter of nationality and maintaining databases through our two databases, which are Lumière, that's for admission to films in Europe, and Lumière VOD, that's for availability of film on VOD. So far, we have been handling mostly films, but we will be additionally introducing in our database and in Lumière VOD TV content as of next December. So one of the hurdles is obviously to discuss about and to tag the nationality, and we have been around many concepts, but basically we are talking in terms of a country of origin. We are mainly talking about funding, and we know that's a shortcoming, but that's the best shortcoming we have for the moment. For most films, it's not really a problem. I have looked at the 40,000 films we have in Lumière. About 15% of them are co-production between Europe and the rest of the world. So that's not insignificant, but that's only 50%. And my other point is that we are talking with a lot of stakeholders, and I have always the feeling that a lot of people are doing the same thing at the same time, looking into IMDb, the press, looking into many databases and reduplicating exactly the same job. And I'm talking here about, of course, the regulators, the services, and many metadata providers doing their own investigation with probably a waste of energy. So I do wonder if we could not save some time and some energy by sharing the information. And probably, as it was mentioned before, I would not talk about harmonization, but this would imply probably that we have, to some extent, a similar approach to the criteria that we use. There are many databases around. We would be happy to be part to the process. Again, our approach is very pragmatic. Let's save time and energy.
That sounds like a very wise proposal. I think the issue of human resources and also financial, because to have many different systems that not always talk to each other, and that can also certainly not be the most efficient way forward. And we have also a comment here from the audience that goes very much in the same direction, wondering if it could not be an option that the co-legislator of the AVMSD could agree on establishing a labeling obligation on producers, licensors, to show, since this shows the downsides when code implementation and reporting is at hand, maybe an issue for a very targeted micro-invasive modification of the directive. So this is a proposal I hand over to the European Commission. But since Madeleine was mentioned by Julie-Jeanne and your task, indeed, there is an enormous quantity of data out there. What would your take be, Madeleine, from Netflix's point of view? May we have you turn on the microphone and share your view with us?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, all good.
Okay, wonderful. So it's always nice to be called out by Julie-Jeanne. Thank you for that. So first, maybe a little bit on the regulatory authority of the media, het Commissariat voor de Media in the Netherlands. Well, it is not a gigantic organization, but it has quite a lot of super smart people. So I'm really sure that they will be able to do the job. And I would also say that technological measures are useful there. And I know they are, but I also maybe a role for ERGA there, looking into ways where you could both harmonize and work together on digital tools. Because of course, I think this is a shared effort, not just by one of the regulators, even if it's small or big. So that's like a bit carve out there. And then on the Netflix user interface, well, on my user interface, I see quite a lot of great European content because I'm a lover of European content. And then I also see that it's exactly rightly labeled. But then let's not have a discussion on our separate user interface approaches at this moment in time. Let's talk about how we can further this in a good way. And we are very enthusiastic about the Lumière database. We also see a very good role for ERGA. So we are very interested in finding ways to be working together to be part of that conversation, because I think it's in all of our best interest to find viable solutions to really start labeling in such a way that it is consistent. And like I said just in the beginning, we really would like to spend all of our manpower and money on funding and creating great European content and not going through a lot of different administrative hurdles.
I can understand that is certainly not the most exciting task to go through all different kinds of labels. We have a question here which makes me call maybe Christophe Roy to answer this, because we talk a lot about movies but not much about TV. TV is the largest volume out there. Any plans for referencing TV too? So I guess this refers both to the idea of a database but also to labels. How does Canal Plus proceed in this regard? Which kind do you label your works? How do you proceed, Christophe? And turn your mic on, please.
Oh, okay. I'll be very quick because I know that we are running out of time. I just wanted to say that when I prepared this conference, I was quite surprised in discussing with my colleagues in Canal Plus, inside Canal Plus, to see that there are different ways to apprehend the works and to qualify the works. We use multiple databases. We use ISAN, of course. We use IDER. We use EMDB. We have, of course, our own databases, which are very important. So I have much sympathy with what Mr. Fontaine was saying to try to save time and energy. And I think that we're not starting from scratch. There are a lot of things already in place. There are a lot of databases. I think we think that there might be some benefit in trying to have a standard European qualification. This is for sure, and this is both for cinema and other kind of audiovisual content. So we should work on that, but always having in mind that what are the concrete needs of the sector. Trying not to build too complicated things. I mean, we have to face a fierce competition of giants, as you know, we European players. So we don't need any constraints or in our business today, of course. And I think also that there is a little bit difference. I mean, for me, between the European label and the central database. We are always a little bit skeptical about the big databases because we know it's very difficult to keep them updated and precise. So I think the most important thing is to have this European label that could be given to all the European works. It would be a very important first step, I think.
Sounds good, and indeed the idea of simplifying, I think, is appreciated everywhere. I imagine also from Vodafone's point of view, so that we can close this final round with Anna Soler-Bassett commenting on this. You have also to access, of course, a huge amount of data, I imagine, when you aggregate the different libraries that you distribute. And what is your take on this? How would you like your life be simplified? And turn on your microphone so that we can hear you. That's helpful.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, just to echo what Christophe and Madeleine said, we use a variety of different methods internally, different databases, publicly available and internally available, depending on different markets and member states we operate in. I think the issue of labeling is before any database, and that's natural. And we're actually quite interested as a member of Deutsche Plattform TV, is an industry association in Germany that's doing some really interesting work around standard labeling. It's looking at different cross sections of data sets, the way to cut and paste country of origin with other pieces of data that as members we find potentially very useful for a pan-European approach. So I'm happy to share some data on this after the conference if that's any help. But I think we need to what comes out with the agreements of rights holders, definitely an opportunity for ERGA to be involved as well. So we're watching very closely what happens, but I think the labeling piece obviously comes before any database. And for us, I think the issue of metadata is really crucial as part of this conversation. We are trying to do our best in labeling, obviously, but the extent to which we all agree on a labeling standard also helps, to your point earlier, Maya, around content aggregation and searching tools as well. So there's a commercial imperative for us as well as a imperative. and it helps us, promote better European works to customers that will actually, continue to log on and use our services and enjoy the content we provide them.
Yes, indeed, that should also be the final goal, to enjoy the very good European content that is out there and which viewers wants to see. So and now I think we have put on the table a variety of elements that can give lots of food for thought to our legislators. So since we have Emmanuel Joly here, and he has kindly agreed to step in to give us a little hint on what could be the next steps, how would you take it from here? We have now aired lots of wishes. I think the common thread is certainly simplification and interoperability. Let's save a bit energy and let the machines do the work. But how can the Commission step in here and give a helping hand? Emmanuel, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Maya. And since we are running out of time, I will be as short as possible. But first of all, I would like to thank the Observatory for this organization of this important panel on very good organization, and thank the panelists for the richness of the debate. I think the debate, basically, what is at stake is the implementation of the provision of the directive on the quota on prominence of European works. Clearly, this is the main issue here. This is not public funding. I mean, in the frame of public funding, it is a very different aspect, and there is no need for a database for data, for instance, because anyway, generally we found new works that don't exist, so they wouldn't fit in any database at this stage. So I think the focus is about what is needed to ensure an effective implementation of new rules on prominence, on quota, that are, as Raffaele, my colleague, has pointed, that are more compelling today. There is no more the element where appropriate and by where applicable and by appropriate means. It is really these are obligations that have been imposed through this directive by the co-legislator, probably because there is the perception that without these rules, maybe the market would not allow a sufficient presence and visibility of European works in the catalogues of VOD services. So I think we have been able to listen to the difficulties of regulators to enforce the rules, but also of audiovisual media services themselves. I mean, because of course they shouldn't spend so much time in knowing whether the works they are acquiring, the catalogs they are acquiring, are really European or not. I mean, this should be obvious. Maybe in this respect, no. Of online tools, I think, would be welcome. Basically, this is what I hear. Metadata is very important also, and we know that there is ongoing work in that, and this is very good. We need to follow that, what right holders do themselves in this area. Also, identifiers are key. And through our program, we have imposed through some actions that the would-be beneficiaries apply for an EIDR or ISAN database, because both we consider should be now, they have announced it, they are interoperable. So we require this identifier. It's not a regulation, but it's in order to benefit from the media support. Now, when we talk about a database, we have to manage the expectations. We cannot imagine a a database that is legally fully authoritative. And I think we heard from Gilles what is about the idea, what is feasible. We have to be practical. And in this respect, the Lumière database is a good basis. There are other databases that could there could be, I think, a cooperation between the different data providers so that we can, on this basis, improve the Lumière database, which presently contains films, that will contain also TV works in the near future. This Gilles Fontaine has just said. Ideally, the Lumière database should contain, I mean, if it's called Lumière, the universal database should contain the universality of European scripted audiovisual content that is potentially a candidate for filling the VOD catalogs. And that needs to be assessed also in terms of what works would potentially fit. Of course, this database would need to be constantly updated in order to be useful. And this is also a challenge, we know it. And the assessment of the nationality should be as accurate as possible within a well-evaluated and limited margin of error. And there, I like the video of Francisco at the beginning with Socrates. I mean, what in practice? I mean, the margin of error could be assessed also, so that in the end we obtain for audiovisual media service providers and regulators a database that could become some kind of reference that could be rebuttable, of a presumption at least of Europeanness of the works that are in this database. So voila, this is, I think, an ongoing work. That is how I would personally see the way forward. That would be an important milestone for the implementation of these provisions. So again, thank you all, and thank you for the organization of this conference.
Thank you to you. And well, maybe I can say that next steps can be a technical table where I assume the panelists of today will be happy to be on board. The observatory is certainly most happy to join the exercise and give the helping hand. So before I hand over to Susanna Nikolchev for closing remarks, I would just like to again thank our distinguished speakers. We started with Raffaele Di Giovanni Bezzi from the European Commission. We heard from Julie-Jeanne Regnault from the EFAD. We had Bernard Herman from the Belgian media regulator, Jérôme Deschênes, president of CEPI, from the producers, Régis Plade, the managing director of ISAN. We had then also from the broadcast, from the audiovisual media services, Christophe Roy from Canal+, Madeleine de Coq-Booning, Netflix, Anna Solar-Bassett from Vodafone Group, and now we just heard from Emmanuel Joly, also European Commission. So thanks from me, and I will just now very modernly turn the camera so that we can see Susanna Nikolchev for her last words.
So I'm very happy to join the thanks to this excellent panelist and also to the attendees. We still have over 200 following us, which I take as a very good sign, and which also means that we have a lot of work still to do. There's so much interest, and we have noted down also a lot of the questions that we couldn't go into detail, but I do not doubt that the observatory will engage also in the near and future and midterm in this very interesting topic. I'm still happy that we are not responsible for any legal frame to be given to this potential exercise. It's still much nicer to observe, but I also see that with our work, we have gotten quite close to possibly being part of the team finding solutions, and we're very happy actually to continue with this very honorable position. And with this, I think you would agree if I also extend very warm thanks to our excellent moderator who had a tough task, because now I can disclose that as modern as we are and we hope to be, we had at the very last minute to resort really to laptops, and that was all planned much differently. This being said, we also can concede that what really counts is the content still, the European content as for the films, and it's not yet the technology. That should only serve us, and it actually did in the end serve us enough. So thank you very much, enjoy your lunch, and stay in touch with us. Goodbye.